Okay, so good afternoon. I am sitting here this afternoon. It's a Friday afternoon, I should mention, so there's a sort of sigh of relief, perhaps, in my voice. I'm sitting here with Sarah Salway. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
To Read Me Something You Love. Thank you so much for inviting me to your flat and serving me tea. And I brought along some macaroons.
Yeah.
We had some macaroons, didn't we?
Which were very delicious. Thank you for bringing them.
This morning I said, what would go well with Kenneth White? And you said macaroons because?
Well, A, because I like them, but also because Kenneth White is a Scottish poet who moved to France. So I wanted to think of a biscuit that had also French and Scottish sort of connotations and links.
And they were good macaroons. I didn't bake them myself.
They were excellent macaroons, Steve. Well done, Papa.
I didn't bake them myself, but just a quick little advert break would be good if Waitrose could be maybe sponsoring these podcasts. But the Waitrose almond macaroons,
very nice, very straightforward,
good.
Delicious. Yeah, they were good. They went really well with my tea, which I thought was excellent. Also,
it was superb. PG tips. Only the finest. So, Sarah, I'm sure needs no introduction, but I'm going to give a brief introduction. Sarah Salway is a writer. 3 novels, I believe, although I know you mainly from your short stories, is how I know you. Leading the Dance, is that the collection?
That's right, yes. Yeah.
Which I think are fabulous short stories.
Thank you.
And recently also a poet, a poetry collection with what I think has to be the coolest title for a poetry collection ever. You do not need another self-help book.
Yes, apparently it's been confusing some Waterstone staff as to where they put it, whether they put it in self-development or in poetry or whatever. But yeah.
Where did you come up with that title? Where did that pop? How did that pop into your head? I
think it's quite obvious from reading some of the poems that I absolutely do need another self-help book. So it's kind of ironic, but more and more. I've been working in the lines of using writing for self-development. I taught on the MA at Sussex, which was writing and personal development. And I think there's something I feel very strongly about, which is in that if we're not careful, we're moving towards a thesis or a way of thinking that we are broken and that we need to be fixed totally. And actually, I wanted to move away from that, to say just because you're interested in self-development doesn't mean you've got a huge number of problems and that without it you're kind of broken, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we might come back to that at some point because there is a poem in here which I think speaks to Kenneth White. Well, there's a number of poems in here that I think speak to Kenneth White as well. But let's hear Kenneth White speaking first. So maybe if you could tell us the poem you've chosen to read.
Okay, I'm going to pick a poem called Winterwood. And I'm not going to say very much about it. I just like to read it. It's Winterwood. So I have put away the books, and I watch the last apples fall from the frosty trees. And I have seen also acorns stretching red shoots into the hard soil. And the white bark of the birches was more to me than all the pages. And what I read there bared my heart to the winter sun and opened my brain to the wind. And suddenly in the mist of that winter wood, I knew I had always been there. Before the books, as after the books, a winter wood. And my heart bare and my brain open to the wind.
Fabulous. I've just realised that I'm missing a stanza on my copy. I don't have that part about the...
Was more.
And I've seen also acres, and the white bark of the birches was more to me than all the pages. Where does that go? Great. Could you read it again?
Winterwood. So I have put away the books, and I watch the last apples fall from the frosty trees. And I have seen also acorns stretching red shoots into the hard soil. And the white bark of the birches was more to me than all the pages. And what I read there bared my heart to the winter sun and opened my brain to the wind. And suddenly in the mist of that winter wood, I knew I had always been there, before the books as after the books, a winter wood, and my heart bare and my brain open to the wind.
So I've put away the books. Why? And how, I suppose, is my question when I read that line. In what is the spirit in which he's putting away these books? I'm trying to sort of imagine this person. It's sort of a curious line in some way, isn't it?
So as I see it here is that he's actually saying, well, we can experience the world through reading or try scientific kind of elements, etc., but we also need to go out in it and just stand in the wood, really, and open ourselves to whatever it's saying, even when we don't understand that. And I think what I like about this, and what I think that I know from the way that I am, there's a great fear of being in kind of uncertainty and chaos, and he's saying, well, no, actually, bear that. I mean, he says, bear my heart, but also like
open your brain to the wind.
Yes. So it's the two, the BARE and the BEAR. You've actually got to sort of cope with that possible pain, really.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic, though, as well, isn't it? In the sense that he's saying, okay, I've put away the books now, and yet I get this feeling that he's been reading all day. Oh, this is exactly what I do, I don't know, on a Saturday, and I've been sitting inside all day, working or reading, and I suddenly go, right, enough! I must go for a walk, or I must... but essentially, I have been inside. I've been cloistered indoors. And then he walks out and has this kind of mystical experience. But I wonder if, to some extent, his life is very bookish.
That's really interesting, because there's a strong, element in there that he's gone to the source of the books. He's gone to the trees, the white bark of the birches, which he sees as a page as well.
Yes.
And so there's that tension, but there's also the whole tension between the winter sun, which I think is very interesting, because you've got sun in winter. Everything is sort of slightly unexpected, and suddenly I knew I'd always been there. So again, you've got the time shifts in that stanza as well.
And this is where we come sort of, I suppose, almost to the nub of the poem. Suddenly in the midst of that winter wood, I knew I had always been there. What is that knowing?
I think...
Before the books as after the books, a winter wood.
What I take it is that you can build yourself up as an academic with all the books, the learning, the theories, but your essence is actually equally as important, really. And sometimes you've got to uncover that, and it's going back to, well, what do I think?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And if you talk to academics, it's very hard for them to get to what they think, because they will bring in quotes from what other people have think, and everything has to be kind of, the evidence and the background and the backing that up.
It was just when you were talking about that, I just remembered something my mum said to me when I was going for, very, very nervous before going for all those horrible series of interviews that you have to do at Cambridge if you want to study there. And she said to me, I'm sure she said it in a much more sort of vulgar way than I'm going to tell it now, but she sort of said, I'm going to try to give the polite version. She basically said to me, don't forget when you're sitting there and struggling to impress these people that they too have to go to the toilet. And she might have even said, imagine them on the toilet. And it worked, because they let me in. Yeah. So, but this poem, it's not as nitty-gritty as that. It is also sort of, although it's not cerebral, It's quite mystical, isn't it? That sense of baring my heart to the winter sun and opening my brain to the wind. And I suppose I'm just wondering kind of how does that feel?
Yeah, and it's interesting that, you know, it's the heart and the brain. It's not the rest of the body. It's not like I'm having a body experience in the woods, but particularly looking at the two bits that you use in sort of the more academic existence, which I'm saying it's against.
There's something still sort of abstract, isn't there, about that, even though he's saying, okay, let's put away these abstractions, let's put away these black squiggles on pieces of paper and go out into the woods, and yet he goes out into the woods to have a sort of an abstract experience, more a thought than a feeling?
I take it that there's a feeling, and it's, I suppose, a desire to be absorbed. But maybe what you're saying by is it a thought or a feeling is that we're not sure whether that desire is actually consummated or whether he's still got the desire to go out.
I like that phrase, a desire to be absorbed. Yes. As absorbed as presumably he was for a period of time with the books. I mean, that's what we have, the same desire, don't we? When we turn to books.
And the line that's repeated is the brain to open my brain to the wind, and that's almost to like take the thoughts away, isn't it? As well, you know, to kind of release sort of all the sort of thoughts that might be imprisoning us, really. And open up to the wind, to whatever might come.
So for you, the opening your brain to the wind is almost allowing it to come in and kind of sweep away the cobwebs, you know, to a certain extent.
Yeah, but you also don't know what's going to be put there.
Yes.
The wind can take, but it can also bring things, can't it?
It can bring spores. I mean, I know that you as a creative writing teacher are very interested in writing prompts, and those are a little bit like the wind delivering these spores of a thought to your mind,
I call them
aren't they?
seeds.
Oh, you call them seeds, don't you? Of course, writing seeds. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, exactly the same thing, and I think it's the kind of unexpectedness that can suddenly trigger something that you don't know that you had inside you.
And yet those seeds, particularly when we're writing, do take us somewhere, and they sort of can also be quite dispersive in the sense that, you know, the thought, suddenly the brain is full of thoughts, whereas I get the feeling in the poem that there's something he reaches a very still and sort of silent place that is beyond some of that kind of accumulative, generative thinking.
And I think that, I mean, it's easy to read it as, you know, the winter wood and the winter sun as like a time of things finishing. But you've got the last apples falling from the frosty trees, but you've got some kind of fruit that you have there. But the second stanza, I've seen also acorns stretching red shoots into the hard soil. So you've got things fruiting as well. So it's getting ready for the next stage, for some kind of transformation. Which could be the open my brain to the wind link with that. You know, and if you have a transformation, it can be reassuring to know that elements of you will still be the same. And you have that with in the midst of the winter wood, I knew I had always been there. And I have seen also acorns stretching red shoots into the hard soil. And the white bark of the birches was more to me than all the pages. And what I read there bared my heart to the winter sun and opened my brain to the wind. And suddenly in the midst of that winter wood, I knew I had always been there. Before the books, as after the books, a winter wood. And my heart bare and my brain open to the wind.
So the sort of the life force that is within all of us has always been there and will be there when the containers that are us no longer carry it.
So there's something nicely insignificant that he's saying we are, and the woods, you know, the woods hold that for us, and nature holds that for us.
And sort of looking at it again, I think one line that jumps out and also says, well, this isn't really, this is quite a rooted poem, literally. It's not abstract, is that I have also seen acorns stretching red shoots into the hard soil. I mean, there's a real sense there, isn't there, of, the striving of life to embed and to prosper and to continue.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I hadn't really thought about that before, but it's not roots, which we would expect it to be. It's red shoots, and we tend to think of the shoots coming up into the air, and actually he's talking about it the other way, that it's actually what's underneath that's important, which links well.
There's something almost, I don't know, phallic about them. There's something almost kind of repulsive about them in a way. I don't know how you feel about those red shoots. Sort of red shoots. It's like something out of Alien, or when the alien kind of comes out of her stomach
into the hard soil. We could have a very phallic reading of this.
But there is something violent and not just sort of mimsy-ish and kind of la, I'm in the woods and having a mystical moment. There's something quite crude and possibly even cruel about, nature red in tooth and claw, that whole thing.
Yeah. But I think it's the striving, isn't it? That actually, you're not going to get something for nothing. You have to work at it. You just don't get planted in a B&Q bag of compost and put in a nice greenhouse, but you've actually got to work, and the soil is hard, and it's frosty, but you're also going to be still for a long time if it's winter, aren't you? Nothing's going to happen, or we're not going to see anything for some time.
And is that sort of analogy, does that resonate with you in terms of the creative process? Because when you were talking, I sort of thought, well, that's a wonderful sort of metaphor for what happens.
I've spent 2 summers. I've had 2 fellowships at the VCCA, which is the Centre of Creative Arts in Virginia, and got very close to one of the other fellows there, who was a wonderful woman, Texan woman, and she grew hyacinth bulbs for the whole time that she was there in water, because she wanted to see the roots forming, so that she knew that although nothing might be kind of blossoming totally in a wonderful way that the world will say there's a lovely flower, underneath she was working very hard. And I thought that was a lovely metaphor for the creative process. But what I really like about, I suppose, thinking about my creative process there, is that bared my heart to the winter sun and opened my brain to the wind, because that's how my ideal of how I would like to write is that, certainly the first draft, that you kind of risk everything. And I do think, the very strong image of when I write, that you're almost opening up, it's going to make me sound a bit crazy, but opening up your skin, and sort of your heart is directly with the journal or the computer or whatever you're writing on. So there's nothing in between that. You're trying to really be as truthful and honest as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful image. So we've moved from the abstract to a fairly raw place, a raw, vibrant place. The sort of the phallus has reared its red head, which I think is just the perfect moment to bring in the second poem that you said we might look at, which is the Intellectual Gathering.
Right. Okay. I love this poem actually. Saucy lit, you called it on
Saucy
Twitter.
lit, yes. It's saucy. In the nicest possible way, in the best possible taste.
Intellectual Gathering. I've read much Hindu literature over the past few years, close on 100 well-studied books. But when I stood there with the girl in the dark blue sari, and might have been expected in that international gathering to make some appropriate conversation, all I could think of was the dark blue sari and her nakedness under it.
Fabulous. Could we have it again?
Yeah. Intellectual gathering. I've read much Hindu literature over the past few years, close on 100 well-studied books. But when I stood there with the girl in the dark blue sari, and might have been expected in that intellectual gathering to make some appropriate conversation, all I could think of was the dark blue sari and her nakedness under it.
Great. So again, I mean, interestingly, we start with a reader, don't we? And a reader who is in some way putting away the books. Here in the first poem, a reader putting away the books to go outside and you know, watch apples fall and look at the bark of a tree. And here a reader who's putting away his books for an hour to go to, I don't know, some sort of literary gathering or
yes,
party,
I see it with
or
like
something like that.
Slightly warm white wine and horrible peanuts. Except this is in France, so I'm sure it wouldn't be like that. But yes,
maybe a sort of book launch for some academic book that no one's ever going to read or look at.
No, but he's just secured his tenure or something.
And he's standing there with this woman who, and perhaps even, I don't know, in the middle, and he's obviously fairly well read in Hindu literature, so they're in the middle of a very studious and studied intellectual conversation. And suddenly he finds the acorn stretching its red shoots into the hard soil.
Oh, poor Kenneth White. Yes. Yes. I suppose so. I think it's a celebration of being human rather than the acorn taking over the world, you know. And I think it goes back to in that poem that you need to bring in the intellect and the body. So you're bringing together the body and the mind, and we've sort of perhaps, or he perhaps in that very academic world has lost some of that, the connection between the two.
Yeah, but not just him. I mean, I think that's what being human is, this sense of being permanently divided and divisible. But
I think what he's saying is they don't have to be at war. I mean, what's interesting is that the title "intellectual gathering." I know that he calls the whatever, this wine and cheese or whatever we want to call it, intellectual gathering in the poem, but to bring it out and put it as a title means that we kind of look at it with more emphasis, and it's a gathering of thoughts, really. And I don't think that actually...
So the intellect is not separate to the sort of thinking about this woman's body underneath her dark blue sari.
No. But I also think that's a rather beautiful thing to do, to be thinking of that, rather than... I mean, he's thinking of it. He says, all I could think of. Yes. He's not going to kind of let rip and pull off her sari. No. Well, we don't know. That might be another poem. But no, I don't think he's lost control. I don't think he's frightened about losing control. I think he's just very... kind of self-aware of what's going on, and I think he kind of likes it. And there's something, isn't there, to make some appropriate conversation. I think that's interesting as well, because there's a thought about the appropriate means that it's not going to be very interesting.
Yes,
it's not going to be very meaningful. It's just something that you say in these occasions, and so actually, what is more important is what we say, the kind of human element, really. But
isn't there also a certain frustration?
Because there are different ways. Maybe this is a gender reading, which would be interesting. But there's also he isn't worried. I can't see anything in here which says he's worried about not having anything to say. He doesn't expect himself to make appropriate conversation. And might have been expected. So you've got to look at, well, who was expecting? There were the conventions.
So he might not be actually. He might be ignoring that expectation and conversing in whatever way he wants to.
Could be one reading of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or not conversing at all. you could then link back. I haven't read much Hindu literature, I must admit, but you could also link it back to I've read much Hindu literature over the past few years. Maybe that links with the dark blue sari and her nakedness under it, because a lot of Hindu literature, as I understand it, is quite not necessarily erotic in the way that 50 Shades of Grey is, but is aware of the body and
has a different relationship perhaps to the erotic than a sort of
Scottish academic
carry on film Mrs. Nudge nudge wink wink kind of
London on a rainy Friday afternoon
relationship that we have to it. Now what I wanted to sort of throw into the mix just to finish us off was,
I'm worried what you're going to pick there.
Well, just rereading your collection in the last few days, knowing that we would be talking and reading it obviously with these two poems in mind. The title poem, which I thought I might read to you, because I think that it talks to these poems, and I'd just be interested if you think there's a conversation, and so much so that I thought it was perhaps even a conscious conversation, a conscious reference, but maybe not. So this is your poem. Actually, I feel a bit strange. I shouldn't be reading this to you.
Now I'm intrigued.
Right.
Come
Okay. I'll give it my best shot. So this is Sarah's "You Do Not Need Another Self-Help Book." You do not need another self-help book. Just get up from your desk and open the window. Keep silent until you hear 3 sounds you've never heard before. Run your tongue around your mouth. Smell the air. I tell you what, put down this book and do this one thing now. Let your hands drift out and touch, then drift again. Run your fingers over rough wood, then let them fall against your own soft skin. I met a woman once who told me to touch her jumper. "Expensive," she said. It bobbled under my hand, so she told me I wasn't feeling it right, and for too long I believed her, because she said quality spoke. I didn't see how beautiful the world is, with its only wish that I belong, and how my touch, my smell, hearing, sight, so different from hers, is the only one that matters.
Oh, thank you. That was beautifully read. Really beautifully read. Thank you.
Thank you for writing it. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem, and I think it encapsulates for me much of the spirit and much more. I shouldn't say that. Kenneth might be listening, but much of the spirit of these two poems as well.
I think that's really. It sounds really stupid, but I hadn't connected the two. But yes, I wrote that poem really for myself, but also a lot of the creative writing students that I have had. So there's lots of the kind of going through the senses there, deliberately going through the senses, which is something I will get students to do. And you'll say, well, what can you hear? What can you touch? And with a lot of adults now, not just children, adults, we've been educated out, I think, of the fact that our own experience of the world actually counts, and that there is something we should be doing better. And it's really interesting when students get it, when adults get it, that the details that they are experiencing are the ones that are going to be interesting to other people, not what they have kind of absorbed as the right ones to have.
Yes. Exactly.
And I think that, there's an element very much of that in Kenneth White's
And I really love the line here about I didn't see how beautiful the world is with its only wish that I belong. You know, that sense that actually that's all the world asks of us. It just asks of us to be ourselves as most fully as we possibly can. And I just think that's it's so beautiful, and it's so sort of hopeful. You know,
I think there's a change. I mean, I do lots of yoga, and still, although I do lots, I kind of do lots of beginning yoga, and it's just such an exciting thing when you realise that actually, if you stop struggling, if you stop trying to get into the position, if you stop holding it so tight that, you know, because you want it to be perfect, you know, you just immediately get in there and everything becomes much easier.
Breathe out, put the book down and breathe, preferably in a
I
wood.
go into what seems like winter, but it's actually late spring.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for reading Kenneth with me this afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the macaroons.
My pleasure.
Delicious. Thank you.
Thanks.